have with me today Hala Matar Choufany, and we're going to discuss the incredible growth of tourism in Saudi. I think the recent record was they hit 100 million visitors, well ahead of their projected goal. And so Hala and I are going to discuss a little bit about what is driving it, what tourism sectors are emerging as the leaders of this trajectory, the role of youth in driving this execution of Vision 2030, and all of the opportunities and challenges that are facing women as this industry is growing here. Short introduction. Hala is the president of HVS for the Middle East and Africa. I believe that HVS is the only global consulting firm that is focused exclusively on hospitality industry. She is considered highly influential when it comes to advising clients on the areas of feasibility and valuations, acquisitions and asset management and strategy. But what Hala and I want to discuss today is a little bit more than the real estate, a little bit more than the asset, and what actually needs to exist for tourism to thrive. And I think as evidenced by both of us being here today is that women are increasingly playing a critical role in hospitality. I think, many people that I work with, they identify that the empathy, the compassion, our ability to communicate, our attention to detail. And for me, when I look at my team, it's this enriching guest experiences, and all of this is driving innovation and entrepreneurship. And I also think that women have played a vital role in the recovery of tourism. Hala, I believe you will agree with me, is that people were cautious in 2019. Markets have been maturing, and then COVID came. Domestic tourism went on the rise at a time when Saudi was transforming and gaining momentum. And so if we look at that framework of development through operations right through to exit, and being the basis of how you've seen investments being made and valued, but we focus today more on the operational element. And in my world, that is when a render becomes reality. I've seen a very big shift in approach. But Hala, what would you think is driving this shift and these growths in these industry sectors? And what other areas do you see as emerging?
Thank you, Rosanna. And pleasure to be here with you today. Actually, this morning we were looking at the 2023 numbers, and we'll just get it out of the way because everyone likes to look at data. And the recovery in this part of the world has been phenomenal, definitely the UAE and Saudi Arabia. With the focus on Saudi Arabia in particular, I think, as you rightly said, during COVID, there was a lot of the domestic capture of demand, but post-COVID, we are now actually seeing the increased visitation in the key source market, which is religious tourism. Clearly this is growing tremendously. I think with the change also with the visa requirements, this has really enabled this to grow significantly. And when I say significantly, we're looking hundreds% of growth in the religious sector. But more importantly, we're also seeing an increase in the international travel into Saudi Arabia. And that is predominantly on the back of the corporate demand. So I would say as we speak today, the two key segments are clearly your religious tourism, some regional travel, but predominantly corporate. Although if we start looking at the leisure segment, this will be further induced by all the giga developments and mega developments that will come into the market. But the awareness already is large. If we look at Al-Ula and how many travelers are actually stopping by to actually spend time in Al-Ula and travel across KSA. So there's a number of different segments which are expected to grow. Some will grow significantly because they start from a low base. But the different demand is there, it exists. And I guess with all the development that is happening, then this is clearly going to drive this demand even more. To your point earlier on, with regards to the, how do you turn renders into projects? And we'll spend a little bit more time talking about that. Clearly during the planning stage, everything looks different. And it's only when you start executing these projects that you can have a better assessment of this demand and applying it more into the operation and how you're executing on that. But, I always like to go back to where I first started in this part of the world. I've spent 25 years doing nothing but consulting on hospitality projects. Nothing compares to the scale of developments in this region, very frankly. I was involved with multiple assets across Europe and Asia, but I guess we all know that the Middle East is different, and especially the GCC, when you earmark your destination as a tourism destination. And clearly, all the support from the stakeholders and the government. So I've been traveling to Saudi since 2007. And I feel I have the right, if you allow me to say that, to
I will, because you were 10 years before me.
Right? Does that make me older? It's okay. And I thought I mentioned that
I just didn't get the memo.
Ages ago. But I'm personally wowed with all the change. And I'm not talking about the change in terms of the development and the construction. That's clearly, we can read about it, we can look at the YouTube, and we can check out the progress of these developments. I'm talking about the transformation from a society standpoint, from the openness, from the eagerness, from the determination. And that is what's going to be really key to the success of the growth anticipated in Saudi Arabia. And because we're naturally speaking also about the women development, what I've sensed over the last couple of years, and we are actively looking to hire, is that there's just so many women out there that want to make a difference, right? And they're just ready, and they want to be trained, and they realize the limitation, but they're very open to actually join the industry and have someone guide them through it and grow them. And it's just impressive when we think about the pool of talent, and back to your point, that talent pool that exists needs upskilling, and then they will be the drivers of the success.
Absolutely. One of the things that I've noticed as we've opened our first properties at Red Sea is, and I think I knew it, but now we're live, we're operational, and I've observed that the Saudi traveller is actually far more discerning, and they're not going to be forgiving. In fact, I think they're going to hold us to higher account than perhaps the international traveller, because they're so proud of what's happening, and they don't, they'll be our greatest critics, but they'll also be our greatest advocates. They're very well travelled. I think a lot of people have travelled and studied outside. They've gone, to Europe. They've gone to the US. They've done their time. They've got the qualification. They've done their internships. They've got the experience. But now there's this whole wealth of opportunity. So they're very well cultured. I found they have a depth of connection to design, to aesthetic. They have a very strong sensory and spiritual awareness. And I think that, coupled with this new level of tourism and this access to luxury tourism in the kingdom, it's just going to see this growth being sort of almost exponential. We're opening at Red Sea over 5,000 keys in the next 18 months, and that's across Red Sea and Amala. We'll also be opening the doors of the Amala Yacht Club, which actually will herald a whole new era of exclusive memberships. It's this sort of celebration of Saudi, of Sal Sea, of sport, but of also hospitality, which hasn't been available. And I have this great number of young Saudis on my team, and you're right, they're brave, they're proud, they're very inspirational, but they don't want to take the short route. If they're truly to hold and carry forward this leadership of travel and tourism in the region, but they do want to achieve excellence. They're prepared to work very hard for it. And the opportunity that they've been given, Hala, it's not lost on them. They're not complacent about this. And I'm sure you will have witnessed, if you were here, 17 years ago, that GCC nations have diversified their GDP through tourism in very different ways, and for different objectives, and because of different drivers. You'd have observed, and you would have advised, different investors with very different portfolios. But Vision 2030 at its core is being designed for this generation and all future generations. I remember someone saying to me, I don't really understand neon. And I said, but neon is being designed for a generation yet to be born. Right. So how do you think that this youth quake, this young generation, are going to be able to continue to deliver on that promise of Saudi tourism that's not only sustainable insofar as the preservation of people and planet, but it's sustainable as a business model and as an investment opportunity?
Yeah, so Rosanna, I just want to add to something you said earlier on about how critical the Saudi traveler can be. And rightly so. They're very well traveled. And actually, when we are now looking at exploring new concepts, such as bringing in the wellness segment or bringing in the off-grid accommodation or alternative accommodation, the main feeder market, whether it is to the Shiva Sams of the world or some other similar wellness destinations, is the Saudi market, right? So, and you're bringing it home to them, and they will have even bigger expectations. And what is interesting is that the future generation, the ones we're talking about today, I mean, as much as they challenge us, and I admit it, they challenge me to the bone because they have become very demanding. Their expectations is that we should understand and adapt as quickly as possible. There is very little tolerance, right? But they are the driver of change. And yes, I agree with you. I mean, I'm finding it difficult understanding the scale of NEOM, right? But perhaps we are not the target market. Perhaps it's being designed for the future target market. Mm-hmm. But more importantly, I think what I've observed from the work we have been doing, the change that has been anticipated. And I'm really proud to see this has been done. If I can just share an experience back in 2016, 17, we've been very active in Saudi, at least in the primary markets in the past, Mecca and Medina, Riyadh and Jeddah. And it was pretty much just having this hotel because we need additional rooms. There wasn't really any prospect of growth. And I remember advising on a portfolio of hotels in Mecca and bringing in a differentiated design configuration, and the client, quite traditional, I must say, said, you know nothing about religious tourism. That's not how we do religious tourism. And I said, I respect that, but it doesn't matter how it was done. It matters how the future traveler expectations have changed in terms of specification, in terms of design, in terms of requirements, right? I mean, times have changed drastically. And then now 3 years into 2019, with the whole Vision 2030, I mean, that conversation became even more relevant that, you know, the way forward, it's nothing to be compared, whether in Saudi or elsewhere, to what we have been taught. So oftentimes it's about also unlearning what we have learned and kind of learning again. And I think with the newer generation, they're more prepared to learn much quicker because they're not necessarily unlearning. They're just in the system. So, I mean,
it's something I enjoy, actually, because I think what you're saying is what we're challenged with is future proofing, which means we cannot just assume or use benchmarks of the past, because actually what Vision 2030 is asking us to do is to set a new benchmark, be the new benchmark, because so much of what we're doing is starting from a blank canvas. And if I think of the scale of our portfolio, data is critical, because really, where is our baseline? We have a critical baseline which is focused on our environment. Everything we do, we're led by the science. We don't just think pretty island, let's build. We work out whether that's the intelligent, sustainable thing to do, because it might be home to nesting turtles, and it has been their home long before we all thought we had our architectural designs in our mind. So what is that future proofing? How do we make sure that what is being done today and the strategy, the planning, and what is being invested in today still is relevant in 10 years, 20 years, 40 years for this younger generation to really own it?
Absolutely. And these are big investments. You're locking in so much capital, and we both know how much funding is going into these projects, whether predominantly through the government sector, but the likes of TDF and other funds as well, in supporting this drive in tourism. And it's not just the hotels. Again, I mean, I think when we talk about this segment of tourism, it is the hotels, it is your entertainment, and you probably can speak more to that and what you're doing, the different experiences you're bringing at the Red Sea, and how are you creating that experience. And I think what I find very interesting, and that's probably what is the most relevant also for the future traveler, is around cultural experiences, the word experience and experiential travel, and more importantly, authenticity of the place. So somehow at times you're also challenging design over, are we staying true to what people want to actually experience when you travel? And I would love to hear from you, Rosanna, especially within the Red Sea, but also, your views as to how are we employing women or local talent, and how are they taking forward the story and the culture and showcasing it through these experiences?
You're right. It's authenticity, but I sometimes feel that's a slightly overused word. where I try and talk more to is integrity and truth. You said truth. What is our truth?
Yeah.
And, you know, you will have obviously had that moment in Saudi related to tourism, and you've just gone, I get it. I had a similar thing in Al Suda, in Al Sird, standing at the top of those mountains, thinking, oh, this is pretty special. But actually, what was really special was all the young Saudis I was with, and I thought, okay, if I'm being invited into this, then I must come into it, but I must be true to their truth. And that is so diverse and different throughout the whole of the kingdom. It's like those wonderful tapestry, those quilts that are made up of different color, different shape, different form. And that all brings together. And so I think a very important part of our role at Red Sea Global, given the extent of the coastline that His Royal Highness has asked us to be the caretakers of, is making sure that we are, first of all, amplifying the uniqueness. I often think when I've gone from sort of north to south or south to north in Saudi, is that every single sand is like a different shade of sugar. You get caramel, burnt caramel, you get icing sugar, and you get everything. And that tells you a truth in the geology. And then when you look at the geology, that will tell you what might have been grown there or what is still growing there. And so everything that we do is by default is to focus on what is that area's particular strengths, and are we truly playing to it, as opposed to making assumptions, and then ensuring that there's this diversity of our portfolio. I have I have an operational team at Red Sea within our subsidiary, but we also have the sort of the strategy, the brain that sits at Red Sea Global, and we do not have a shortage of applicants for jobs. Male, female, we are 50-50, both in Saudi and international. We're 50-50 in female and male. And what has actually happened, what tourism has done, is it has opened up an enormous amount of other employment opportunities, vocational career-driven opportunities, things that people thought, I don't have a degree, so but how do I get involved? Now you can join a much more guest-facing, and that's what the brilliance of hospitality is, very service-led, which is so profoundly in the DNA of Saudis. I lead on the our commitment to accessible tourism, and it's not a difficult thing because they're so inherently spiritual. It's part of their being is to care for others before themselves, this selflessness. And what hospitality has done is it's opened the door, and the amount of hand raisers we have through our hotel operators and all of the staff they hire, but also all of our operational team at projects. It's overwhelming, but why not? Because of the scale of what Saudi is addressing, these fundamental things that are so legacy cemented in other destinations, we're able to challenge all of those status quos and lift the lid on it.
No, absolutely. Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, because there are certain things you cannot teach, right? And hospitality, as you rightly described it, is at the heart of what the Saudis are. And therefore, they need upskilling in terms of carrying out the job, but not how to do it and not how to extend the warmth and the service. And I mean, I'm very excited. I definitely think some of the challenges that were experienced elsewhere, when you look at such a massive pipeline, perhaps Saudi would not necessarily struggle as much. I mean, in the early days, yes, we all acknowledge the fact that we need to train more and we need to guide them. But in 3 to 5 years' time, you have a pool of actually experienced and talented. I guess this is a question that the industry keeps asking itself, and perhaps every other industry, but more so the hospitality. How do we continue to keep our industry attracted for employment opportunities? Right? I think the challenge is not necessarily finding the talent, but retaining that talent. How do we, as employers, make it even more attractive? I mean, we did speak about the future traveler and future guests, but these are the future employees as well, right? So what are they looking for? They're definitely not going to work the way you, Rosanna, did or the way I did. And there's nothing wrong with how we worked. We're just acknowledging that times are different. And therefore, I think, again, creating this strong culture and endorsing your corporate company culture in line with their culture and value system will become even more important. And perhaps what I'm just tracing out here is that how prepared are we as an industry to also acknowledge and deal with the future requirements of our local talent?
I think it's one of the things that I'm particularly proud of when we use the expression regenerative, because I think sustainability has been around a lot. I mean, I actually wrote my dissertation on it in 1998, which is going to age me. But that we're still talking about it now would tell me it was never enough. And it's always very, very much spoken to the environment. But I think what I enjoy about regenerative tourism is it's also about the community. There's a strong, strong socioeconomic element to it. And so if I just think of Red Sea and Amala, and we have Uluj and Alwaj that sort of sits in between. Yeah. And they're just full of wonderful, wonderful people who are so want to be a part of this transformation, so much want to be a part of this vision. And so we as giggers, if that's what we're going to be called, we have a duty of care to ensure that they are the primary benefactors, because they will be there. They've been there for millennia and they will be there for long after we've all gone. And so that it's imperative that they have a sense of involvement and a sense of ownership. And one of the teams that I love working with is our social community team. And we sort of look at that universe of things, whether it's sudu weaving or the beekeepers or the boat builders and everything in between, because you're absolutely right, how people, and there's been a shift. I think historically, people didn't always travel for culture, but their travel was enhanced immeasurably when they had an interaction with it. I think there's been a shift. And I think people now genuinely are intrigued, and they don't want it to be sort of, follow the umbrella or the flag around a site. They truly want to understand, what is that thing, where is that truth? And then what we're able to do, because of the big hotel chains that we're bringing in, the big hotel partners, the big spaces that we're creating for entertainment and for events, is that how can we provide for them really healthy supply chain? Because then that stimulates something very organically. It's not just funding them, giving them a grant. It's rather empowering them and saying, are you with us? Because if you are, we're heading this way. And I think that's going to create this sustainable model that has to be able to exist with or without, you, me, other people. They have to have a sense of ownership of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
The other thing that I wanted to discuss with you today is, and I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and it's often the case, I get that very curious question about my role as a female in business in the Middle East. And I don't think I'm ever going to stop being asked it, actually, because as it transforms, it'll just sort of be, people will move from confusion and fear into excitement and how do I get involved? And I think, people are becoming, and travel is going to be a big part of that education, and that people becoming increasingly aware of, it's shifting. And I think women entrepreneurs are also going to be one of those real flag bearers, because I don't think they're just breaking a glass ceiling. I think they're actually shattering it. And whether that's in fashion, technology, finance, healthcare, women are starting to lead businesses that would have previously been dominated by men. Right. I think it's resilience. I think it's creativity. I think on my team, I have a number of them who are, force of nature, sometimes forced to be reckoned with. But what I've observed in them is that they champion each other. And then what that's done is created this opportunity where people will thrive. But if we are being honest, Hala, it does get tougher at the top. That juggle of personal and professional. There's also dealing with that male dominance of the senior executive positions. And so if I just sort of take off my rose-tinted glasses for a second and put them to one side, and we actually start looking at what are those real challenges that will be faced by women in travel, and not just in Saudi. I think it's a global thing. As I said, I've worked in the Middle East for about 20 years, the past 5 of which in Saudi, and it's been a roller coaster. And I have sat in, quiet corners and had a weep. But in your experience as a woman in hospitality, what's that one thing that comes to your mind that acts as an obstacle for women to enter into the industry? Or have you seen progress and that strength that we should all be playing to? And what's the interest in, what is the industry actually doing to potentially work together to change it?
Yes, a couple of questions there that you've asked, and I probably have a bit of a different story with, I mean, I tend to agree with a lot of what you said, but these are always personal experiences, right? So because I've been with HVS for 20 years, and perhaps rightly so as a company, most of the partners were female. This was never really an issue as I look at it from a corporate standpoint or from a firm. Now, I did work across the Middle East, Asia, Europe, Africa, and for each, I would probably say I could look at it as, sorry, I could look at it from the point of view of being a female, or I could look at it from the standpoint that it's different cultures. I was not necessarily challenged in the Middle East as much as I was elsewhere. Perhaps when I was in Europe, it was more a function of me being much younger. It wasn't an issue of being a female. It was just that I was a young consultant. I think in Asia, it had to do a little bit with the culture. So I'm not disregarding the fact that there's still so much to be done in our part of the world, and to celebrate that we have done a lot. I mean, I remember when I first started attending FHS, or what used to be AHIC, there were only very few females, right? So that's since 2000.
But I think, Hala, what I'm saying is, I don't think this is Middle East. I actually think this region is light years ahead of others. Yeah. I think it's an industry-wide thing, the challenges that, how do you go up the food chain? It becomes more male. And is it because we're having to balance personal and private? Is it because by the nature of the beast, travel and tourism is travel, which is a lot for a mum and a wife with other duties and other responsibilities? Right. Because I actually think it's other parts of the world that need to almost catch up with the Middle East, because I don't see any ceilings on any of the young females in my team. But I feel there is a duty of care to help them understand the value of that balance between male and female working together. One is better because of the other, because we challenge each other.
Exactly. And you've nailed it. And I was going to actually address this point in the sense of what is it that as an industry we are doing to provide these equal opportunities. So, and I think we are not doing enough. And I've said it once before, when we're looking at inclusion and looking at really promoting and supporting, we have to reassess how we, the way we hire, the way we retain, the way we even do performance reviews, because it's just the fact that we're acknowledging that we're totally different. And personally, that's my view. Men and women operate differently. We complement each other 100%. But the way we take a criticism or praise or anything is quite different. And therefore, as a firm, are we really applying ourselves in addressing the differences that exist while being fair and equitable? Because we need to be fair and equitable. And my sense is that till date, the women are discouraged to push forward all the way, because there's a point in time, there's a sense that we're still going to be judged if we had to say we need to stay home to look after the kids, right? Where typically, and I think this is more rightly, as you said, this is a global issue that needs to be addressed. And perhaps we are on par. So I don't want to make it sound like, it's more challenging. As I said earlier on, I thought it was less challenging in this part of the world than what I experienced elsewhere. But I definitely think that we need to be doing more to actually encouraging them. I mean, the reality of the matter, having full-time jobs, having a family and a full-time job are two full-time jobs. I mean, I can speak from my own experience. I've raised 3 kids and it's a full-time job. It's doable. Not everyone should pursue that. Again, it's a personal choice. It is doable, but it's great to be working. And this is why I always stress the company culture. It makes a whole difference to work in a company that actually encourages and supports women.
Yes.
The days I've had to say, I cannot do this trip because I'm needed back home, not for a second I felt I was judged. And that's why I've been here for 20 years. And I think this is extremely important.
Yeah, you reminded me of an event I was at, and there was young Saudis, Emiratis on the stage, and they were talking. And I was so impressed by how composed they were and how confident, but with a wonderful elegance to it. And as I looked around the room, their fathers and their brothers were in the audience. And I thought, that's it. Yeah. Men have been championing them from the get-go. And so they have a sense of confidence in themselves. And it is that. It's about this. Nobody needs to fight each other. And I do think it's this much more, this spending time with each other as humans as opposed to colleagues. Taking time to understand what makes us all tick and what makes us, what we care about. Because the further up you get in an organization, the more you're challenged on those things and the more you think that you're not allowed to be that person, the closer you are saying, then I don't need it in my life. And so it goes back to your point about attrition and retention. And so it's critical that we all have enablers and supporters and champions, male or female.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's that balance that's the key.
That's right.
So Hala, I'm going to see you in a couple of weeks here in Riyadh.
Indeed.
For the summit.
Yeah, I'm looking forward.
And I am quite certain that, like you, I've been supported by great enablers. I'm quite certain you and I probably have got a lot more to discuss. But I hope you enjoy your Eid with your family and your friends. Because I've got great people. I have a great husband, great children, and I've been able to have this sense of person, and I see great things in the world. And I think that's another key thing. If you're going to work in the travel and tourism industry, you have to be able to be that optimist. You have to be able to appreciate beauty and goodness in people and in
no,
the planet.
Absolutely. And Rosanna, I'm glad you brought it up because we were talking about it more from the business context. But again, if I am to reflect on my journey, I would typically add that you also need a very supportive family, right? I mean, I was brought up in a family where my dad really believed, we were the only girls at home, but he really
believed. I can see by your smile.
Yeah, he believed in all four of us, and it made a whole difference. And then, as you said, the husband and the kids and the support you get. So, I mean, you definitely need the right system around you to support you because it can be challenging, but it's just easier when you have the right structure in place. I also look forward to seeing you at FHS and also visiting you at the Red Sea.
Please, as my guests. I cannot wait to have you there.
And now fly Dubai on the 16th. They fly direct.
Fly Dubai, you can come directly. And Juma, the Ritz Reserve will be opening in a few weeks. So no, I really look forward to welcoming you and hosting you, Hala.
Sure.
Thank you.
Love to. Thank you so much.
Have a great break, and I will see you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
See you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.